And exhale, Penn State fans. And then the Lions snap a 3-game losing skid, taking down Maryland in College Park 31-14. Once again, Tim Aiden, joined by my Black Shoe Diaries colleague Marty Leap. Marty, how you feeling? It's been about a good month since we got to enjoy one of these dubs.
Yeah, definitely feeling a lot better than I was even probably about an hour ago. When Maryland tied the game there early in the fourth quarter, I was thinking, oh boy, here we go. And, as we'll get into, to Penn State's credit, that fourth quarter was the best quarter of football we have seen from them in quite a while. They played some really strong football last week against Ohio State, but that was a great quarter to see. Great to see them respond to the adversity. And yeah, like you said, it's nice to finally be doing one of these shows after a victory again. It's not just after victory, but the way the last 3 losses have gone, just heartbreaking, head scratching, all kinds of different emotions. It's great to come out on the right side of one of these again.
I mean, I feel you. As I mentioned before we hit go live on this broadcast. I live in Terrapin Country. I live in the Maryland suburbs of the Washington D.C. metro area, and so a lot of Maryland alums, Maryland fans. But I guess thankfully they don't care all that much about the football team. I mean, the college football team at least. They're more, Ravens or Washington football team fans. When it comes to the Maryland Terrapins, they're more, I think, into basketball because that's Maryland's bread and butter, historically speaking. But certainly the thoughts going from my head, I'm like, well, all right, I guess I'm going to have to, get some good natured ribbing from my Maryland buddies for another year, like I did last year after Maryland absolutely just waxed Penn State at Beaver Stadium, granted with no fans and in a weird COVID year. But, like I said, the way those first 3 quarters wasn't looking too promising. Penn State did get up 7-0 early. And Sean Clifford looking a little shaky. Even that touchdown strike to Jahan Dotson to start the game was, a bit underthrown. Now, maybe, I don't know if that was purposeful because he just didn't want to overthrow him, or if it's just a bad throw that just Jahan happened to be in the right spot to catch it because he was so wide open anyway. But he does that. And then, the defense kept holding Maryland in check and, kept forcing Maryland to punt it back to them. And they seem to be moving the ball at times too. Like they would get around mid, and it seemed like Maryland was just kind of giving them, kind of like daring them to just go for the kill shot. In this case, kill shot. If they had gone up, 14-0 at that point, I think they could have maybe run away with the game before halftime. Kind of similar to what they did 2 years ago during that much hyped Friday night game where, it was close early on, but then Penn State got a few big plays. KJ Hamler breaking a tackle on a 3rd down catch and then just high stepping his way 50 yards to the end zone. That was kind of backbreaking for Maryland. So you're waiting for the kill shot to come, and it just never came. And then Maryland, where halftime came down and scored a touchdown, and I guess, and kind of maybe a foreshadowing of how maybe this game would end up going. They shot themselves in the foot with a missed extra point. So it's still 7-6 at the half. But then, second half, Penn State comes out, still looking a little shaky, but, once again, Cliff finds Jahan Dotson for a touchdown. It's 14-6. Now you're thinking, all right, well, maybe now they can start to get something going here and put them away. But no, Maryland, I guess to their credit, they didn't throw in the towel. They fought back, and eventually, at the start of the fourth quarter, they end up finishing a nice drive in the end zone for a touchdown, and then get the 2-point conversion to tie to 14. And so at this point, Marty, I think you and I were bracing for the worst. And then, boy, Penn State just from there on, they really came up huge. That I think probably looking back, the biggest play of the game was Sean Clifford on 3rd and long from probably around his own, I want to say like inside their own 15. Jahan Dotson somehow gets loose in the secondary. I don't know how Maryland allows that to happen, but he just gets loose. Cliff finds him, and once he catches that, he just turns on the jets and takes it to the house for a touchdown, which made it 21-14. Maryland, it seemed like they never quite recovered from that because Dotson once again burned them on a later drive, which helped set up a field goal that put Penn State up by 2 scores about 8 minutes to go. At that point, with the way Penn State had been playing defensively, even a 10-point lead felt like something that they could hang on to. But Maryland sure did keep things interesting almost to the very end. They drove down inside the red zone about 2.5 minutes to go, I want to say, and looked like maybe they're going to score a touchdown or at the very least kick a field goal, make it a 1-score game again, and put us perhaps in a onside kick situation. Or they had 2 timeouts, so who knows? Maybe they would have kicked. Maybe they would have gone for the onside though, because they only had 2 timeouts. But anyway, I digress. But they looked like they're going to make it a 1-score game again. And all of a sudden, Jair Brown makes the game-sealing pick 6. Takes it 87 yards to the house. And don't know about you, but I was finally able to exhale.
Yeah, that was definitely my exhale point as well, too, especially earlier in the drive where, you had Jaquan Brisker who nearly had that pick 6, and then a couple plays later, Brisker has an interception that gets negated by a penalty on Joey Porter Jr., and then finally you had Brown come up with that big INT running it back. And, I think this year Jair Brown's definitely been a player who's played some solid defense for the Nittany Lions. At times he's been out of place, but, he's a guy who, because of COVID stuff, really didn't join the program on a full-time basis until September of last year, I think. It had a shortened season and everything. So you continue to see strides there. And to his credit, while yes, he's had games where he's made some mistakes, he's seemingly come up with so many big plays like he did today. And, that Dotson touchdown, that 86-yarder you mentioned, I agree. That was the biggest play of the game because Maryland appeared to be in position, to seize momentum and maybe make Penn State pay for all of those opportunities. Because early on, Penn State, like you said, very easily could have put this thing away and just kept driving the ball and then shooting themselves in the foot. And it looked like Maryland was finally going to make them pay. And, I think it's funny because you mentioned that KJ Hamler touchdown on that Friday night game a couple years ago. That play reminded me a lot of it. You got Dotson the ball in space, and just as Hamler did on that touchdown, he just turned on the jets and outran everybody. And, it's similar too, because I don't remember who the receiver was for Hamler. Actually, I think it was Dotson, if I remember correctly, threw a big downfield block to spring him at the very end where the only defender who could tackle him got blocked. Today, there was something similar. I don't remember if it was Keandre Lambert-Smith or Parker Washington. One of them threw a big block down the field to help really spring him at the end and make sure he wasn't going to be caught. So that was the biggest play of the game. I agree. Just a phenomenal day for Jahan Dotson. As you see scoring across the bottom of the screen, there 11 catches, 242 yards, which is a single game Penn State record, 3 touchdowns, which is a personal single game best for Jahan Dotson. It's getting to the point you're running out of things to say about the guy. It's unfortunate, I guess you could say, that in his career, the last 2 seasons when he was the true star of this team, you're not going to see, maybe it won't be super memorable seasons for the Nittany Lions, but the guy's going to go on to do great things in the NFL. And I think the biggest thing for Jahan Dotson, and I'm sure fans agree with me, it's great to see him do what he's done the last 2 years also, so that play against Minnesota in 2019 where he got tackled by the turf monster will not even be anywhere near what he will be remembered for against Penn State. Because so many times you see guys' career who have a play like that, and that's what they're remembered for. Thankfully, Dotson is going to be remembered for all kinds of great things. And today's game is going to be one of those at the top because he just took this game over. And as long as Jahan Dotson was on that field, he was going to make sure the Nittany Lions were going to muster enough offense and that they were not going to lose to Maryland today.
Well, and thank goodness it took a record-breaking effort from Jahan to stave off a second year in a row of getting upset by Maryland, which, would probably had a lot of repercussions down the line. But, it's certainly, I know Penn State Twitter and our Slack channel on BSD was a bit apocalyptic at times about, fire everybody. Maybe we've calmed down a bit since then. So do you still want to fire everybody, Marty? Or
I mean, I definitely still have a lot of questions about some people on the staff, particularly the offensive side of the ball. Um, and from some of the reporting we've seen from some of the insiders on like 247 Sports, things of the nature, seems like James Franklin is feeling that same way about some offensive assistants. So I do think we'll see some coaching changes this offseason, but definitely not just pulling out to victory, but pulling out the way they did by really putting together a strong fourth quarter and coming up with big plays when they needed. It definitely helps. Definitely helps quell a lot of the concerns, I would like to think, in Nittany Nation.
right? I mean, what's the one thing we kind of harped on during this losing skid is they seem to fold under adversity, and this time they faced some adversity once again. Maryland tying the game to begin the fourth quarter, and then they score 17 straight to end it. With Brown's pick six being the final nail in their coffin. So it was definitely good to see that happen. I guess you maybe would have liked to see Parker Washington, Kendall Smith have a better game. They both had a couple. They both had a couple drops. I know Lambert Smith had a drop. Well, it was on the same drive where we ended up kicking a field goal anyway. But he had I remember he really dropped a nice dime in there. It was right about midfield, and he should have hauled that in and hit him right on the numbers in the spot where he should have grabbed it. So I mean that could have cost him potentially, but thankfully it didn't. So you'd like to see, next week, especially with Michigan coming to town, I'm sure they'll do a better job, trying to contain Dotson than Maryland was today. At least they got better athletes on the defensive side of the ball. But I guess going towards other things like the run game, at times it felt like, now obviously the stats aren't so 34 carries, 97 yards. Now it doesn't include minus 12 rushing yards for Cliff because sacks count as rushing yards, which is stupid if you ask me. But so again, another pedestrian effort on the ground, no surprises there. But I'll say, I'm looking at stat. Kevon Lee, 8 carries, 50 yards, had a long of 15, averaging about 6 yards a carry. So not too shabby. I would have liked to see a little bit more of him. I do think and Noah Cain, he had nothing to write home about, but at least he was falling forward at times, picking up some extra yards when Penn State needed them. So it was at least a bit encouraging to see. Now, again, this Maryland defense has been terrible against the run all year, so take it with a huge grain of salt. But, Marty, what did you think of the run? Did you think a little better than what we've seen in recent times? About the same?
It's funny because I'm currently working on my takeaways article for Black Sheep Diaries. I always do after the game. And literally, as you were saying, you'd like to see more of Kevon Lee. I was typing that Kevon Lee probably should have gotten more touches than he did. Like you said, he averaged over 6 yards a carry. Even catching the ball, he had 2 catches for 17 yards, made some plays there. I do think, with Noah Cain, he statistically didn't have a great game, but I thought at times today, Cain looked like he was running the ball the best he has all year. He ran with more conviction, looked to be running a little more confident than he did for a lot of the season. For much of the season, the struggles of the running game has been a joint effort between the offensive line and the running backs, I thought today, personally, it fell more on the offensive line than the running backs. I thought Lee and Cain both ran the ball hard. Both made guys miss. Both had some good bursts, but there just was not much help for them up front. So while the struggles of the running game has been a group effort for much of the season, I really did think today it fell more on the offensive line than the running backs.
Right. And, the offensive line, again, it was, mixed bag. At times, pass protection at times they were okay, like good enough at least to, open some lanes for the running game and protect Cliff. But other times, shaky. I guess at this point, we know what the offensive line is. Probably no need to really get into that. Like you said, lines 24/7. There's been some hints that Franklin's going to be replacing certain coaches on the offensive side of the ball, especially. And if I were a betting man, I would think perhaps Phil Troutwine's on the chopping block, so to speak. So we'll see how that shakes out. I guess going over to the defense, obviously Maryland, they're a team that, similar to Penn State, they can't really run the ball much. So they were also very reliant on their quarterback. And Tua Tagovailoa had just credit. Stat line was pretty good, 41 for 57, 371 yards, and a touchdown, although he threw a very costly pick six at the end when they were trying to make it a one-score game. But Marty, what was your impression of the defensive effort overall?
I mean, I thought for the most part, it's the defense we've seen most of the season. They played tremendous. Even when the offense put them in bad spots, they stepped up. There were multiple times in this game where Maryland looked like they were driving for points, and the defense would force a false start, draw a hold, get a sack, a TFL, whatever it might be. And next thing you know, Maryland's out of field goal range and stuck putting the ball. Or they're in no man's land and they're going for it on fourth down and the defense is getting a stop. I mean, yes, Tua Tagovailoa threw for, what'd you say,
371 yards.
371. But, I mean, it really didn't feel like he was, like, picking the secondary part or anything. To Maryland's credit, their receivers made some pretty ridiculous grabs today at times. And, again, just the defense did what they've done all year. They've stepped up when needed. And, I was really impressed with their ability. I mean, the pass rush was not great today by any means, but they also did not have Jesse Luketa. Derek Tangelo was kind of in and out of it, battling whatever that injury bug was for him. But to their credit, there were plenty of third downs when they needed to go get after him, and they were able to generate some pressure. Arnold Ebiketie had another big game with that. Brandon Smith was big as a blitzer today. But just as much as people – I feel like at times this year have unfairly ragged on this defense some, especially like that Iowa game for giving up those points late. So many times this year we've seen the offense put them in a tough spot and they step up and answer the call, and they did it again today. And like we said, no play was bigger than that Jair Brown interception return, taking it back 87 yards to the house. So, yeah, I thought overall the defense played good. Could they have done a few things better? Yeah, they definitely could have got some more heat on Tagovailoa at times. But ultimately, you're not going to complain about going on the road and having your defense allow only 14 points while forcing, 2 or 3 turnovers, I think. Even that fumble by Maryland, yes, was it just the two? But even that fumble by Maryland, sure, there was some luck involved in that when the snap hit off of I think it looked like hit Taulia's face mask and flew forward. It was a weird play, but the defense was still aware enough of what was going on. We're still heady enough to make sure they fell on the ball. And there's been plenty of times in the past where Penn State defenses have not done that. The ball's been there for the taking. They've failed to recover it. So, yes, there was some luck on their end in that play, but you still, again, you have to be on your toes. You have to be aware, see ball, get ball, and that's what they did today. So, yeah, I have no complaints whatsoever about the defense today. Brent Pry continues to have a tremendous season as a defense coordinator for the Nittany Lions, and John Scott Jr., the defensive line coach, very quietly continues to prove a lot of people who were questioning him after last year wrong. And I also think Anthony Poindexter, the safeties coach, and I don't think this is surprising anybody with his track record, both as a player and as a coach, is having a great season. I mean, you have Jaquan Brisker, who's playing at a legitimate All-American level, and Jair Brown is looking like an all-conference level safety.
Oh, no. Right. I guess to build off on Jair Brown, he was getting, I know in our Slack channel, also from my friend was texting me during the game, he was oddly enough, the defensive player that was getting ragged on the most for, being a liability. And yet he had probably 2 of the biggest plays. He was responsible for both of Penn State's takeaways, recovering that. Geez, I mean, I don't know what that fumble was about when they were trying to hand it off. It's like, I feel like when you play the old NCAA football video games, and there's like some glitch, that just causes the ball to go off.
Yep, that's honestly what it looked like.
It looked like a glitch in a video game kind of thing. It just bounced off of Maryland player's helmet and just it's there for Brown to just scoop it up and fall on it.
Like when that fumble would happen, I was eating, so I take a bite and I look up and I'm like, I'm thinking in my head, like I reached down to pick my food. I had to have missed something while I was eating, and they showed the replay, and I'm like, no, it really was that freaky, fluky, weird of a play. And I guess whenever you're Maryland, I'm sure if you talk to Maryland fans, I'll tell you this is the kind of stuff that happens to Maryland. But
Yeah, I think yeah, there's well, I'm in the Solid Verbals Discord channel, and there's like a Maryland fan in there who's just happy that Maryland was hanging tough for 3 quarters. So
yeah,
it just describes the minds. They're. I remember like looking at. I think I saw a link to like their own 24/7 message board, and one of the predictions here. Well, I guess to be fair, there was a contest. Like you had to predict the final score and the time possession, like as a tiebreaker. Whoever's the closest would win a prize. So I guess we put a prize on there. Maybe people get less homeristic. So I was a little surprised though to see how many Maryland fans are predicting Penn State would, blow them out by like 3-4 touchdowns.
yeah.
It shows how much or how little confidence they have in their program.
Which is weird too, because I know, in our Black Sheep Diary Slack channel, this is something we've talked about a lot in recent years. One of the things we usually get a good chuckle out of is how many Maryland fans usually are on the other boat, thinking they're going to blow Penn State out, or hey, this is finally the year we beat Ohio State or whatever it might be. So, like you said, maybe putting the prize on that's what it takes to get Maryland fans to be a little more realistic in these things.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I was going back to the fumble, and then also they I lost count how many times like when they were driving and then in the Penn State territory, and then they would commit a dumb penalty like a false start, or I say dumb, maybe just untimely. They get a false start, they would get a holding penalty or intentional grounding, and that would end up putting them out of field goal range. Even, I mean, they cost themselves. I forget about getting the answer. I mean, they cost themselves probably. I'm thinking off the top of my head, probably at least 2 field goals in this one, which could have made it. They could have been leading at some. I don't think they ever led in this game, but they
No, they
could
did
have been
not.
ahead at some point if they hadn't shot themselves in the foot. And I also lost count just how many times the receivers dropped balls that they should have brought down that could have been huge gains or even touchdowns maybe. But so Penn State did dodge some bullets too, to be fair. But I guess we can talk about why Maryland fans in general don't, are thinking to themselves, "Oh, same old Maryland's." That I guess today's performance is one of those reasons why.
Yeah, like you said, it was Maryland definitely made a lot of mistakes. I thought Jalen Duncan, who is a very talented offensive tackle, definitely an NFL level guy. I don't know if Arnold Ebiketie was just living in his head or what, but I think he got flagged for, I know at least 2, if not 3 false starts today. He got called for a holding. Like you said, a lot of untimely penalties by Maryland. And that goes back to, like I said, about Penn State's defense, where I give them a lot of credit, is a lot of these penalties by Maryland were penalties that get forced by a defense. A holding call. There was that intentional grounding where Tagovailoa was back there running for his life and just chucked it up. Like, yes, that's the offense committing a penalty, but that's still a penalty that the play of the defense drew the penalty. And I thought, like I said, that was one of the areas where Penn State's defense really came through. And to their credit also, when Maryland made those mistakes, penalties, turnovers, whatever it was, they would step up and take advantage of it. There were plenty of drives, as we mentioned, where Maryland, like you said, cost themselves, even in field goals, probably cost themselves 6 to 9 points. And because of the defense taking advantage of those mistakes, we're able to then keep the Terps off the board that drive. And obviously that all proved to be huge coming down the end.
Although oddly enough, look at the penalty stats. Penn State had more penalties than Maryland. It's 7 for 54 yards. Maryland had only 4 for 25 yards, which a little weird to me. It seemed like
Yeah, I know. I would not have guessed that.
No, unless maybe that's a typo. I don't know, but
I mean, I knew Penn State. It was not a clean game for Penn State. I mean, what Joey Porter Jr. had, I think, 2 defense pass interference calls.
Yeah, defensive holding. Well, this is the other thing. They had a defensive holding called on Brisker's what we thought was
interception,
probably a game-stealing interception by Brisker with 4 minutes to go, but they called defensive holding on that play. So Maryland got new life, fresh set of downs until Jair Brown stepped up to ice the game.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I knew Penn State had their fair share of penalties, but I would have guessed that hearing Penn State at 7 penalties for what you say, almost 100 yards, whatever, is not surprising. But I would have guessed Maryland would have been about right there with them. So yeah, it's just, again, it's for me, it's a feel good win in a lot of ways, if you look at just the score, it's a little bit different for anyone who didn't watch the game. His game was definitely closer to the final score, but Penn State was in a position they just needed a win after the last 3 weeks. And something you and I talked about in the postgame show last week, Penn State under James Franklin after Ohio State has not always been good. This week it gets him back to 500 the week after the Buckeyes. He's 4-4 now, but this was actually only the second time they ever covered the spread the week after playing Ohio State. So, yeah, that's also, I think, a big thing for them where – and, anyone who's ever played a sport, yes, you'll always say you don't think about that kind of stuff, but it's human nature. That's going to get into your head. So moving forward as a program, that's where this victory could be good on a building block kind of thing where, okay, you know what? We finally beat that, put that struggling after the Ohio State game behind us, and we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right. Yeah, it was a nice monkey for them to get off their backs. Like I said, typically the week after playing Ohio State, they tend to come out and fall flat on their face. And I guess to be fair, they looked for 3 quarters was looking that way, and until they, got their act together in the 4th quarter. But again, good on them. They finally, just it was good. I guess a relief to see this team finally win one of these clunkers that they've been playing, these last few games. So So I guess thinking ahead a little bit, you got Michigan next week. Following week, you got Rutgers at home, and then you finish the season at Michigan State, who just got beat by Purdue in a major upset, 40-29. Purdue fans storming the field as they should. Some other Big Ten action today. You had Ohio State in a struggle with Nebraska, beat them 26-17. I watched some of this. I also listened to some of it in the car as I was running errands, and had a kind of a similar ending to Penn State's game at Ohio State last year. It's a 6-point game. Nebraska was hanging around, and then Ohio State, just towards the very end, they kicked a field goal to make it a 2-score game and effectively ice it. So interesting. Illinois, as you said, best team in the Big Ten West. They go into Minneapolis and knock out the 20th ranked Golden Gophers 14-6. So they can find a way to win 2 more games. Brett Bielema will be going in his first year there, which was frankly not something anyone really saw at the beginning of the season. Wisconsin absolutely rolling future opponent Rutgers 52-3 in Piscataway. That will be interesting to see, how much fight Rutgers has when they come to town in a couple of weeks. And right now you got Indiana, Michigan going on, and Iowa, Northwestern. Iowa's up 7-0 on Northwestern, almost the end of the first quarter as we're recording this. And Indiana, Michigan, the score was tied, but it's only about 6 minutes into the game. So there's your Big Ten action for you. Marty, let's go back to the rest of the schedule. Actually, this kind of leans into a question we got from one of our earlier. Can we hang with Michigan State? Marty, I'll let you take that question first.
I think honestly, a lot of it's just going to depend on what version of Penn State do we get. If it's the Penn State from the first, 5.5 games of the year, the Penn State from Ohio State, the Penn State to finish this game today, absolutely. They're more than capable of hanging with those teams and beating them. If we get the Penn State that we saw against Illinois or the second half against Iowa or that him-hawed around for large portions of today's game, and even with today's game, the early struggles, again, like we said, it's coming off of Ohio State. You've got Michigan next week. This definitely was a little bit of a letdown spot. Yeah, I still think Penn State's definitely capable of clipping at least one of the Michigan's goals. Even with like Michigan State, you get that last game of the year now, and this is assuming they also lose to Ohio State. And by then, hell, for all anybody knows, Mel Tucker might be the head coach at LSU. Like you could be getting a very just dejected Spartan squad coming into that one based off of everything that unfolds between now and then for Michigan State. But, I will say this week on a personal note, I think I had mentioned it on this show before, but my oldest son, his best friend who actually is currently at my house, is first cousins with Blake Corum. So this is his mom likes to give me some crap whenever Penn State loses in general. So it'll be a big week on the family feuds. And
you want to bring him down here real quick for a scouting report, Marty? I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'll see what I can dig up for us. But no, it's so that's just a fun little thing that it's pretty cool to see. But I can speak that he does come from a great family, so it's great to see the kids succeeding. But no, I definitely think Penn State is capable of defeating those schools if they play to their capability. And I think that's one of the things that's so frustrating with Penn State this season is we've seen what they're capable of. And what they're capable of is truly being a top 10-ish team who can, as we saw last week, hang with just about anybody in the country. When they're not playing well, they're capable of looking like they've never picked up a football before in their entire lives. So, the rest of the schedule, I would like to think they dispatch of Rutgers pretty easily. I'm sure they'll come out and get Rutgers' best punch. They always do. But I'm sure they can take care of business there. And, obviously you want to try and get to 9-3 to give yourselves an opportunity to potentially sneak into the New Year's Six or finish the season with 10 wins with your bowl game. But I'm sure pretty much any Penn State fan out there would have told you after the Illinois debacle, hey, you know what? This team's still going to go 8-4 and beat at least one of the Michigan schools. Just about anybody would have taken that with how that team looked at that point and what was looming with Ohio State. So, if they can do that, I would definitely be happy. You can get to 8-4, win your bowl game, put you at 9. All things considered, which you've always got to take into factor, everything that unfolds during the course of the season. If they can do that, I still think this can be at least a somewhat successful season. Maybe not what you're looking for, especially when they were 5-0 and appeared to be on the way to defeating Iowa. But with everything that transpired in the second half of the Iowa game and against Illinois, if you can still be in position to go get your 9th win in what would likely be a New Year's Day bowl, you would definitely take that with when you consider where this team was at coming out of that Illinois game.
I just want to take a second to say hello to everyone who's tuning in, whether it's on the Penn State channel or the Big Ten channel. The risk of sounding like a gaming YouTuber, smash that like and subscribe button if you like what you're seeing and you aren't already subscribed to us. So blackshoediaries.com, that's where Marty and I both write, where Marty's working on his 3 takeaways right now as we speak. I'll have my position grades up sometime tomorrow. It typically goes up on Sundays. So we're also Black Shoe Diaries. We are more than just Penn State football. If you're a wrestling fan, I know the wrestling teams dominated the last decade. I never got into wrestling, so I can't appreciate it as much as our wrestling writers do, but they do a tremendous job. Hockey season is going on right now, and the basketball team tips off this coming Wednesday, the start of the Micah Shrewsbury era, which has many lifelong fans, like long-suffering, lifelong Penn State fans like themselves, excited for what lies ahead in the future. So, BlackStars.com, year-round, we're covering Penn State athletics.
And hey, anyone who knows us will attest for Tim and I to be excited about the future of Penn State basketball. They're doing something right because, we the two of us, along with Ellie Moretta Feliz, who I know has been on the show a few times this season, the 3 of us kind of really spearhead the basketball coverage over there. And now Ellie is much more optimistic in general than we are. But for Tim and I to be excited about the future of Penn State basketball, things are going good. So like you said, make sure you check out Black Shoe Diary, especially if you are a hockey fan, because I feel like there probably is not a site on the internet who covers Penn State hockey better than Colin and the guys that we have over there do. So definitely make sure you get over there if you are a Penn State hockey fan. Check out what we have.
Yes, and actually, look at some comments here. Blow up a building.
That's a fitting name with his comment, I feel.
Yeah, I hope it's not the Twin Towers you got there, buddy. I'm personally a firm believer that Franklin's isn't a good fit for Penn State. Do you think that Franklin's preparation for Maryland was an issue in the first half? Marty, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if a team starts, everything's always going to fall at the feet of coaching in any sport. And to me, the first half thing, Penn State's first 2 drives did not go well. They had negative yards. But I felt like the first half in general, what they schemed up worked decently well. There was poor execution on the players' end. I know, obviously, you still have to put some of the fault for that at the coaches. But if the players aren't executing, that's not all on coaching. you know, the times I've been very critical of James Franklin, I think all Penn State fans have at times because there's been a lot of questions with clock management. And like today, before halftime, I still don't understand the decision to not try and go down and get in field goal range here
That
when you
was
had your
baffling.
timeouts. Yeah, it was almost as if he didn't trust his offense. And like I get the offense was struggling, but for the most part this year, when Sean Clifford's been in there, the offense has been awesome. Really, the only time they haven't been able to throw the passing offense, I should say, really, the only time all year they have not effectively thrown the ball with Sean Clifford, the quarterback, is against Illinois. And as we came to find out afterwards, he was far from 100% against Illinois. So you got to kind of give him a bit of a mulligan for that one. But yeah, I didn't understand it. And with decisions like that, he's going to catch criticism. But I don't know. My biggest thing is with James Franklin is I really do wonder, has he potentially reached his ceiling here at Penn State? But then when you look at what his ceiling is here at Penn State, what they won 11 games, 3 out of 4 years or whatever it was, 3 New Year's Six bowls, winning 2 of them, a Big Ten championship. Is there anyone in the country who's going to have a higher ceiling than that at Penn State? That's something that always needs to be taken into consideration as well. And not to keep harping on recruiting, but you look at the recruiting class they're bringing in, which includes the number 1 quarterback in the country. I understand fans want to make coaching change. There's been times this year I've been frustrated and popped off saying that, rather actually meant it or not. And then you take a step back and it's like, you know what? Under James Franklin, the one thing this program has lacked, and this is no disrespect to Trace McSorley whatsoever, who's one of my favorite Nittany Lions of all time, and in my opinion, the best quarterback in program history. They've never had that elite quarterback under Franklin. And Drew Allar, week in and I tweeted this last night when some of his highlights from his playoff game in high school were popping up on my Twitter feed. So it's getting to the point I'm becoming like irrationally excited about Drew Allar. And it's like,
It's hard for me not to either.
Exactly. It's hard not to. If you have not watched this film, do yourselves a favor, go check it out. It's Clay, who writes with us over Black Sheep Diaries, also has said this, where to him, he looks at Drew Allar and he sees Aaron Rodgers. He sees Pat Mahomes. Like, maybe that's a bit over the top, but that's how good this kid's talent is. And my thing is, when you have a coach who's had the success Franklin has, and he's finally got that elite quarterback coming in, you've got to give him that opportunity. I think it was on here that I made this comparison a few weeks ago. What if Clemson would have given up on Dan was coming in? And it's very similar because next year will be year 9 for James Franklin. And I believe Deshaun Watson's first year starter was year 8 for Dabo at Clemson. And Clemsoning was always Clemsoning until it wasn't anymore. And it was Deshaun Watson who made it no longer a thing. Dabo was given the opportunity with his elite quarterback, and that program took off. Now, I'm not saying Penn State's going to become Clemson by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying James Franklin's got his elite quarterback coming in finally. He should be given the opportunity to work with Aller, and if it doesn't work out, then you really reassess the situation.
Now, obviously we know no one's going to force James Franklin out unless, some scandal pops up, which in that case we got much bigger problems. But in our recurring weekly theme of Franklin Watch, I got a text from during the game. My good friend texted me. He's watching with his parents and my friends, my parents, and he's saying, "Oh, everyone wants to know, Tim, what do you put the odds of Franklin returning at?" And give a percentage number. I told him about 70 to 75%. Where would you put it at, Marty?
Yeah, I would put it at least that, maybe even higher, honestly. It's just, for me, it's hard to envision a scenario where James Franklin is not leading this program next season. Obviously, LSU, USC, those schools are going to make a run at him. But in the end, I think he sticks around. In the end, I still think he's here. I think the only possible way James Franklin is not coaching the Nittany Lions next year is if things just completely come off the rails and they somehow lose all of their remaining games. And I can't see that happening. I in no world can see him losing to Rutgers. So, and even then, I think they probably pull out at least one of the Michigan games. But yeah, I think a big part of it too with Franklin is if you go to USC, you're looking at a rebuild. You go to LSU, it's not significant of a rebuild. You're still looking at a rebuild. At Penn State, you're not looking at a rebuild. And as I said, you have your quarterback coming in. You're about to sign the best recruiting class he has signed here. I would definitely put those odds at least 70 to 75%, maybe even a little bit higher.
Yeah, I'd say my 70% was probably more of a conservative estimate. Just hedging for the fact that it sounds like he and athletic director Sandy Barber are they seem to be on the same page with regards to getting more the funding he wants. I think it's a matter of them convincing the administration, the president of the university, and who's going to be retiring in June anyway, but convincing them, convincing the administration, board trustees, like, yeah, we need a fuller, we need this, the X, Y, and Z, whatever Franklin feels is necessary to, help Penn State catch up to the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Bamas of the college football world. And it's interesting. I mentioned USC, and I think it's I'd say if Franklin were to take one of the jobs, I would say USC is the more likely one than LSU. I feel like LSU is its sight set on. I don't think Franklin's as high on their list necessarily. I think they got a couple other big fish they're shooting at, like Jimbo Fisher, and I'm trying to remember the other big name. There's rumors that they were looking at Lincoln Riley. They're trying to make Lincoln Riley say no, so that'll be something to look out for. But with USC, I remember I saw a photo tweeted out last week. They were playing for their homecoming game. I forget who they're playing, but the attendance was downright pathetic. I know they're having a rough year, but it was like maybe 1,000 people, if that. That's the thing. Franklin's all about. How many times does he tweet ad nauseum about 107K strong? It was out there in Southern California. You got a whole lot of other things to do out there on a Saturday if USC is not doing so well. With the beach, just nightlife in general, and of course, LA's a big sports town. You got the Dodgers, the Lakers, Clippers. We've got a couple soccer teams, got a couple NFL teams now, which wasn't the case when they were in their prime under Pete Carroll. Like that was like the NFL team at the time. But now you have a couple actual NFL franchises there. So it's really, he's going to be going up against, I think he realizes too, he would be going up against so much else. Like, whereas, here, Penn State, they're the main attraction. Penn State football is the main attraction. You're 2.5 hours away from Heinz Field. You're probably about 3.5 from Lincoln Financial Field where the Eagles play. So it's, you're the main show in town. So and like I said, I think they're going to, I feel like worst case, they're at least going to beat Rutgers, but I feel reasonably confident that they can get a split between Michigan and Michigan State. I guess if I had to put a gun to my head, I'd say they beat Michigan next week because it's at home. And it would just be kind of funny because maybe they could deliver one more nail to Jim Harbaugh's coaching coffin, which, of course, Ohio State would deliver the final nail. But, that loss to Michigan State kind of, shifted the narrative back to, oh, Harbaugh can't win the big games, and so I don't know. Even if Michigan does beat Penn State next week, I think it's going to come down to the Ohio State game for him. If they can win that, then perhaps they'll take some heat off of him. But otherwise, it's going to be the same old lines about Harbaugh.
Yeah, well, speaking of Harbaugh, again, like you said, it's early. But I have the Michigan-Indiana game on here. It's still scoreless. They're now inside 5 minutes left in the first quarter, and Michigan just got stuffed on a 3rd and 1. So those calls might be getting louder as the night goes on. One other thing, too, the USC thing that you mentioned, how when Pete Carroll was there and running that just powerhouse that they were, not having the NFL competition, not only do they have NFL competition now, it's 2 of the best teams in the NFL. The Rams with their front office and Sean McVay look like they're not going anywhere anytime soon. The Chargers have one of the best young quarterbacks in the league in Justin Herbert, so they look like they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's not just having that competition, but having that competition that's among 2 of the best teams in the league. And the same can be said about basketball, where the Lakers and Clippers are 2 of the best teams in the Western Conference. In Major League Baseball, the Dodgers just won the World Series last year and have been arguably the most successful team in baseball the last 5-6 years. And with the Angels, yeah, they don't win a bunch, but they have Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, so there's still a pretty big attraction there. So there is a lot going against USC. with the crowd and all that sort of thing. And like you said, that's something Franklin really values in his program and something that could be a factor there. As again, to circle back to Jim Harbaugh though, yeah, if Penn State beats Michigan next week and geez, now Blake Corum's limping off the field.
Yeah, see, I'm watching right now too. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh man, that does not look holy.
No, he looks to be trying to avoid putting any weight whatsoever on his right leg. So this could really be a problem for Michigan. But I think if Penn State beats Michigan, I would start to feel pretty confident they get to 93 because I think for some of the reasons we listed, Michigan State could be the team that might be easier to dethrone. I also think Michigan State's defense is a lot more suspect than Michigan's, but 1 week at a time. Right now, I'll focus on Michigan. I will say though, if they are going to beat the Wolverines next week, they definitely need Derek Tangelo to be 100%. Definitely would help to have Jesse Luketa back.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Wolverines are going to try and run the ball, and you're already thin. You've already lost, 3 projected preseason starters from the defense?
Yeah, I mean, P.J. Mustafer, Hakeem Beeman, and these
Isaac, yeah.
Projected starters preseason. The only other projected starter that's around is Allen Ebiketie.
Yeah. And to me, that's what makes the job John Scott Jr.'s done this year that much more impressive. Not just because the defense line has played really well, but they've played really well being gutted depth-wise. And they already were not a deep group to begin with. But, yeah, if you're going to beat Michigan next week, you got to stop the run. Ellis Brooks, I was having an exchange with someone on Black Shit Diary's Twitter during the game about this. He might be their most improved defensive player this year. He's going to have a big week next week at Mike linebacker, getting the defense set up, filling holes, stopping that run game. And, your other linebackers, Brandon Smith and Curtis Jacobs, both have played pretty good football the last 2 weeks, much better than linebackers played against Illinois. So you're going to have to get a great effort from your linebackers as well. And I think the talent is definitely there. It's just a matter of them not having repeated the Illinois game, poor backside pursuit, out of position, all that sort of stuff. But, yeah, I do think Penn State's very capable of beating Michigan, especially in Happy Valley. And, we got to wait and see what happens injuries here. But if that Blake Corum injury does prove to be anything of significance, obviously, because Michigan's still going to look to run the ball 50, 60 times a game. But if you're looking to put the majority of that on Haskins instead of having someone there to balance the load with him.
He'll probably throw. My guess is Donovan Edwards gets more carries. He was I think 4 or 5-star recruit.
I believe he was a 5-star guy. Yeah,
5-star running back, freshman running back in the fold. I'm sure he'll get some run. But
I mean, obviously, still freshman running back at Beaver Stadium. That's still a tall task. So I'm sure.
I'm hopeful it's a good crowd next week. Because there's still, it's one of the last home games for a lot of these guys. But just like I said, there's still even though the Big Ten and obviously championship and playoff are out of the picture, they can. Like I said, 9-3, and perhaps sneaking into a New Year's Six bowl game is certainly on the table. I mean, if you think about it, they do it 9-3. It means they'll have beaten. They beaten a ranked Wisconsin team on the road. They'll beaten a ranked Auburn team in the whiteout. They'll have beaten a ranked Michigan team. They'll have beaten a ranked Michigan State team on the road. So, I mean, I would hope the committee would factor that in and rank. I think it had to be top 12 to automatically get into a New Year's Six. I would think that would be enough to get them maybe around the 12 spot.
It depends on your conference as well, because if you have 3 teams from the same conference that are in the top 12 and not in the playoff, it's not a guarantee. But I mean, if Penn State's 9-3, the Big Ten does not have 3 teams in the top 12 at that point, because Michigan and Michigan State are. Honestly,
it will help if Ohio State wins out and goes to the playoffs. That frees up that Rose Bowl bid, which,
as crazy as it might sound, may not be totally out of the question for Penn State. Because if they win out, Ohio State wins out. You have Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, all with 3 losses. Penn State wins over them. The Big Ten West champion is going to have 3+ losses. Could very easily be a Wisconsin team Penn State beat. So Penn State at 9-3 very well may be the next highest ranked Big Ten team down to Ohio State if all of this happens, which could land them in Pasadena, which would just be insanity to think about after everything that has unfolded the last few weeks. But obviously, we're getting way
bipolar season you can think of. Start off 5-0, you're in the top 5, then your quarterback gets hurt, and you don't have any capable backups to hang on to a lead, or you don't have a running game that can help you hang on to a lead on the road. And so then you go into a spiral, lose 3 games, including to a bad Illinois team. Now, maybe they're a little better than gave them credit for, but still, that's a team Penn State had no business losing to. So, to do that, and then if you come back and go undefeated in November, finish 9-3, and it's good enough to get you into the Rose Bowl, or even like Fiesta or Cotton. I mean, it's not Cotton. Cotton's part of the play, but say the Fiesta Bowl. That would be, like I said, that's kind of like a bipolar season in a way. Go from highest highs to the lowest of lows, and then back up to to a nice New Year's Six high. Marty, anything else you want to get off your chest before we move on?
No, I don't think so. It was good to get the W today. It was good to win it going away the way they did, to finish this thing strong, and rest up, try and get healthy as healthy as you can, and get ready for a big one against Michigan next week, who is coming off the loss against Michigan State, and they're really struggling here early on with Indiana. So it definitely looks to be a game that the Nittany Lions, if they come out and play to their capability, can get the job done in front of, well, like you said, hopefully will be a pretty full, pretty raucous crowd at the Beaver Stadium.
It's not was it a helmet out? What are they calling it? They're like the
yeah, I don't know if it's got a name. It's basically like we can't do 2 whiteouts in the same season, so we're going to come as close as possible as we can.
It's not technically a whiteout, even though it's basically a whiteout.
Literally,
blue stripe in the middle.
There's 107,000 seats in the stadium. 105,000 of you are going to be in white. You have the 2,000 where you're blue, make a stripe.
I mean, an interesting way of, it's like, tell me you're having a whiteout without telling me
you're having a whiteout. Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be. I plan to be there in person. Marty, did you say you were going to be there too?
Probably not now. So I will round somebody up to help me out next week. But if something changes, we'll figure it out.
Sure. So, well, thanks to all you who are tuning in on the Penn State channel or Big Ten channel. Hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you to tuning in to us, Tim and Marty here on the Voice of College Football, Mark Rogers TV. As I said, I will be at the game next week against Michigan, so I will not be on here, but Marty will be holding down the fort with someone else, perhaps Ellie or Jared, or either of them available. Marty will run it solo, perhaps. I'm sure Marty can handle it. But regardless, we will see you again around this time next week.